Welcome to the Divorce Diaries podcast. One man's anonymous and live account of if he should get a divorce or stay married. He's been cheated on, and he's cheated. Protecting the innocent with changed voice patterns, the omission of names, ages, and genders. His authentic journey and account of the daily events of his marriage are helping him sort out his feelings and not get lost in the ups or the downs. New episodes are released daily. Welcome to the Divorce Diaries podcast. Entire seasons are released on Patreon weeks before anywhere else at Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Link in description. Now for today's episode.
I'm doing a little bit of trauma unpacking today, and I decided to record this. This diary entry is going to be about seeking approval from others, and my father in particular. I have a thought and a theory where people, how can I say this? They seek the approval of others, and I've been told often by many members of my family that I have a veil and a mask that I try to wear, and I don't want to let other people in. Or I have a perception of myself that I want painted in the world, which the people that have said it to me are pretty damaged people, just like I am. I'm not saying it in a pejorative way like, oh man, damaged people don't tell me what I am. No, I mean, most of us are damaged. Most of us need therapy. Most of us need to heal from our traumas. Most of us need probably, I wonder if there's an actual official term for this. Ways to find out what is trauma that you may not know. Like, my stance on corporal punishment has changed a lot. My stance on corporal punishment with kids, parenting kids, like, spare the rod, spoil the child. I used to feel that spanking a child was okay. Slapping their hand when they're trying to reach and grab something, swatting them on the butt when they're doing something they shouldn't, even spanking with a belt. I now think that is probably one of the most easily avoidable trauma risks you can ever have, because you don't know how a child will respond to the different verbal things you can say. You don't know how a child may respond to you not speaking to them, maybe, which they may respond to those things not so great. Like, oh my gosh, Mom, when you told me that, I failed a test and I could do better. Wow, I felt that your expectations of me were so high. The child may take that stance. It may say, Mom, or Dad, when you forced me to play in that t-ball game, you really made me feel like I was inadequate and I should be on your level, and you wanted so much out of me, and it put so much pressure on me. Okay. Those are going to be trauma events that a kid is going to eventually have to learn to unpack. And they're going to need to recognize what that trauma event really is. Did your dad really push you farther than he should have? Or was your dad trying to inspire a spirit of non-quitting in you? What was your dad really trying to do? So then you can compartmentalize and you can say, oh, this was a trauma event, or this was a trauma event and I should look at it as such, or wow, I've been looking at this as a trauma event and now it's reframed in my brain. It is not a trauma event. I feel my father was more caring than he was hurtful or harmful to me. Or I feel that my father was not as caring about me as I hoped. My father actually is, oh my gosh, like the worst thing ever. So sometimes we compartmentalize things in a way. And like I said, these people that have talked to me in my family, they've said, there's a mask and I'm so worried about what other people think. I do believe there's some truth to that. But the bigger truth, I think, is I know that I am harder on myself than anyone else could ever be on me. We could unpack that further. That could be because of some of the trauma events from my parents and the pressures that they put on me, and now I put the pressures on myself. All I'm saying is the spirit of this, of my standards for myself are much higher than anyone could ever put on me outside of myself. So the notion and the perspective that I am worried about what others think about me is a false narrative, but it may be true to an extent because I may put so much pressure on myself based on how I grew up and the pressures that my parents did put on me. So now, like I said at the beginning of this, specifically about my dad, I feel that growing up, I never really gave a shit about what he thought about me. Now, he gave me some standards based on how he lived that I adopted as my own standards, but I never did anything for him exclusively. Like, my father is not and was not and still likely isn't good at a great many things. And that's not a shot at my father, because my father is good at what he's good at. And one of the things my father is good at, he is great with his hands. He is a handy person. He is officially, I would say, he is a carpenter. A carpenter, I believe, is an actual trade, and it's an actual trade like profession, like it's recognized by somebody or something like that. So I don't know if he has like some carpentry's like certification or anything like that, but the things that he knows, he is a carpenter. Like you can be a master plumber, like you can actually get a certification to be a master plumber, or you can be like apprentice plumber or something like that. But my father's a carpenter, I believe. That's not his job. That's not his profession. So whatever, you can go like look for carpenters and like try to figure out who the heck my father is. You won't find him because you'd have to find out like you'd have to Google like carpenters. I don't know. You won't be able to. So my dad, I would he would call me Tapper, because when I would drive the nails into the wood, when I'm framing a basement or something like that with him, it would take me maybe 8 to 10 maybe strikes of the hammer to actually sink the nail. Whereas with my dad, he would take maybe 2 or 3 hits, 3 tops. And sometimes he'd show off, he'd do the one tap to kind of sink and set the nail, and then he'd give it a good whack and he could drive that thing all the way through. I mean, and yeah, when I was younger, you know, when you're a boy, you look at your dad doing that and you're like, holy crap, like this guy's got man strength. Like he's really strong. He's my superhero. And my dad was, you know, he was my superhero at one point. And I did come to him when I'm like, I would maybe I would seek validation. So maybe approval is not the right word, but I definitely did look for some validation, because I would say, hey, Dad, check this out. And I'm seeing if I could kind of show off for him and kind of stick my chest out and say like, hey, I'm hanging with you, or I'm there with you, old dude. Like, you know, or I'm not so weak. I'm not as weak as I was last week. But it was never anything like, I never had any stress behind it. Like I even grew to be able to kind of make jokes, because he would call me Tapper. And he said, oh, hey, Tapper, there you go again. Tap, tap, tap. That could have been some of his own trauma. He could have been saying that to make sure that I always knew I wouldn't outgrow him and I wouldn't be better than him. And I think the deterioration of our marriage, of our relationship, probably came from me probably came from me always being comfortable knowing that I firmly put him in the position of my father. I put him at a position above me, higher, just higher. And I feel that that was inspired by some of the levels of respect and standards that my parents had. You know, they're the parents and they know more, and you're the child, you know less. Yes, those things sort of change over time, but what you can't compete with and what you can't beat is there are things that they will have experienced that you didn't. They will have perspectives and age and time on this earth that they can help you see things in a different, better, brighter light than you were able to in your maybe dimmer perspective where you didn't know really. You didn't know what you didn't know. And some of the things that you don't know, they do. So I think a very good default is for kids to kind of default to their parents as being the better, smarter versions. They're just better. And I think it's cool. You might be disappointed eventually, which is okay. Find yourself disappointed when you find out that, your parents maybe aren't smarter than you. In fact, they might be toxic people. They may be hurtful people. They may be dark, and they may be people that don't need to be in your life at all or to varying degrees. But I feel that I always had my father in that exalted sort of place. But I never looked for his approval because I guess I always looked to him, not for the thing, not what he couldn't do, but I'm like, he's really good at what he's good at. So, keeping a good schedule, keeping good time. He works in a profession where he does have to be punctual. So I learned that from him. And so I really wouldn't be late. If I made plans with him at a certain time, I wouldn't be late for those. And I didn't expect that he would. So it was just a way that I moved through life. And I would feel that if I did something that I shouldn't or whatever, he would call me on that, in a decent way. It wasn't bad or anything like that, but there was definitely a darkness that sort of fell over him, and I still love him, despite some of the things that he's done and said. I know that where he is now, there's probably no room for us to have a relationship, but that still doesn't allow me, in my mind, in the way that I operate, to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, my father and I never had any good times, or there were never any potential for any good times. So to everyone that says that I wear a mask, I don't really wear a mask. I have a very I look at myself and hold myself to sometimes unfairly rigid standards. And to those that don't, you may not understand the level of scrutiny I have on myself. And sometimes when my eyes dart back and forth, it may seem like I'm checking for approval and I'm trying to maybe keep on some mask, or I'm trying to keep up some sort of appearance. And I may be, but I'm always sorting through and I'm always auditing myself. It's definitely obsessive. It's definitely reactionary. And it's definitely constant. Am I being the best version of me right now? Am I being the best version of me right now? Am I being the best version of me right now? That is literally the tape that is playing over and over and over in my head. So yes, I am always double checking. And sometimes when I'm double checking, I'm devil's advocating when I'm double checking. So it may seem like, oh, I'm questioning what's good, or I'm trying to position myself strategically to be doing the good thing, to be doing the right thing, to be doing the appropriate thing. That may be what it seems like, but yes, I mean, in a sense, that's what I'm doing, but I'm not doing it for anyone outside of me. I love you. Hurting you would be devastating to me. So sometimes I obsess over what I do because I think I may be hurting you. And I don't want to do that. Or I feel that this conversation we're having is really important. And in my brain, the stakes are so high, I can't fuck this up. I cannot fuck this up. So what do? I may push too hard. I may focus too much on the obsessing. I may not realize that I'm doing that. And then I say something and it doesn't come out right. And it all comes down to me in the end trying to be a little bit more comfortable in my own skin. Me not trying to build Rome in a day. Me really going easy as it relates to dealing with myself and others. But make no mistake, I want the best for everyone that I bring into my life. And now I'm realizing that the vice-like grip I have on myself isn't healthy for me. And the vice-like grip I had on others, my family, my children, my wife, that wasn't appropriate for them. So knowing that I've squeezed so hard that I've scarred, that I've loved so suffocatingly, I've suffocated some. Emotionally, I've been such a heavy lift. So emotionally, people don't want to lift me anymore. I get it. And boy, it's taken a lot. It's taken a lot of time and growth and healing to get to where I am. And I still have a long way to go. And it'll likely be just like my daily practices of yoga. I will never be perfect. And I've really enjoyed yoga for that reason. It's a constant reminder of this could be better, but it's not supposed to be perfect. You're just supposed to try. And that calm, sobering thought is what has been so helpful for me, and probably why I haven't written off so many other people in my life, and I'm understanding why people do it. It's tough. I understand the ease and simplicity it takes to be able to write someone off permanently. It takes a lot to keep them around. You do it for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's damage and it's trauma bonding. But once you really do the work on yourself, which I'm now understanding that I had to do, and it's sort of unlocking also. I'm okay. And I'll be okay. My kids will be okay. My wife will be okay. As long as we all continue to work on ourselves, then we likely won't have the conflicts when we bump into each other again. And with my dad, it's going to take a lot of work for him. And I'm not saying that in a judgy way. I'm submitting an understanding when you are addicted to substances on top of your own individual traumas you've got to work through. It's going to make for obviously a much steeper uphill climb to healing. And he's older, so there's less time that you have, but amends can be made, and I'm prayerful, hopeful that we all can go on the right journeys, find the right help, where we can all be authentically healed comparatively to what we were. Okay, guys, thanks for listening to this entry of the Divorce Diaries. A little bit of insight into me and a little bit about my dad, a little bit of where some of my trauma does come from. Sad that we aren't speaking, and likely won't again, but I'd like to.
Wow! That was the Divorce Diaries podcast. The Daily Saga will continue tomorrow. The full season's episodes are on Patreon now. Subscribe for early access. Click the Patreon link in the description. Hopefully, these entries help our anonymous recorder as a form of his own personal therapy. That's his hope and his intention. Will these recordings of life's curveballs lead this family to the best resolution in the end? We'll keep listening. New episodes are released daily on all podcast players, but all episodes are available on Patreon at Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Until next time.